we have a Siskiyou resource list. We're working on a homeless specific resource list. We've got a food list for just Yreka. So we have a lot of resources that we've been gaining from this work that we've been doing together. And Guy brought forth this idea to have this speaker come tonight and talk to us, so we wouldn't have to go make mistakes and recreate the wheel, and we might learn from what you've done in Reading. So I'll let Guy introduce our speaker for this evening.
Well, good evening, and thank you everybody for coming. As Michelle mentioned, there's been a group of us, we know who we are, that have been meeting for the last 6 weeks because we're concerned with the question of homeless. And I just made a few notes. It won't take long. I just put, because of various concerns in the community, we're looking for a community support here about the need for a shelter. We are discussing as a community how to best address the needs of our community. Okay, we know that there's programs. Oklahoma City's got a great program. Seattle does their thing. But Yreka's a little different, as you all know. Yreka has their own needs. We're a unique community, I think. I should say Siskiyou County. And so we've asked Cesaer Partida here tonight to explain how the Good News Gospel Mission came about and give us some constructive ideas on how to best accomplish our goals. I would ask him, I'll ask him what his original vision was in Reading. Like, when you first sat down, I don't know how many years ago, and I'm sure you know, how you went from where we're at now, everybody kind of putting their ideas together. How did you get from that to, you know, it's a very successful, it's not just a shelter, it's rehab, it's, well, Cesaer will tell you all about that. So Mr. Partida will give us a story about his mission, and then we would like to open up discussion and have a period of questions and answers. So we've asked him to come and kind of give us how he made it work for him, how we can model that in Yreka. And then I ask you to please keep the questions brief and to the point, and identify yourself just as a concerned citizen, as a business owner, or as a group that you're representing. Okay? So, without further ado, this is Cesaer Partida, and thank you very much for driving all the way up from Reading just to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for being concerned about the homeless population in your community. That's the first and key thing that really starts the whole process of developing what can you do as a community to serve those less fortunate in your community. You asked, got a couple trains of thoughts here going on. Let me talk a little bit about the history of the Good News Rescue Mission, just to kind of give you a backdrop to that. This summer we'll be celebrating our 50th year of operations. We were established in the summer of 1964. A group of concerned citizens, very much like yourselves. They saw a need out there, and in those times it was the drunken bums in the streets, you know, back to 64. You know, that's kind of how they were thought of. So initially, the thought was, if we can get the guys off the streets and get them cleaned up, you know, and get them sober again. And so it was kind of like 3 hots in a cot and a place for the police to be able to drop off the guy that was kind of the habitual drunk that they didn't want to house down at the drug tank anymore, but would bring him down to the mission so the mission can help clean him up. So it operated that way for many, many, many years, for a couple decades actually, until about the mid-'80s, when we started identifying and seeing a dramatic change in the population in Reading. It was no longer the traditional, you know, the town drunks and that kind of folks, but what we found is it was during that time, probably about in the 70s, when the state mental institutions started shutting down, and all those folks were now being out in the streets. So for Reading right now, what we have is basically 3 types of folks that, or 3 categories, I should say, that come to the Good News Rescue Mission. 35 to 40% of the people that we see have a mental health issue. It's either unaddressed, under or over medicated, or not medicated at all, or they're using other things to medicate themselves to handle their mental health issues. So there's that population. There's another 35-40% that have an addiction issue, either drugs or alcohol or prescription drugs, whatever that case may be. And so we see those folks in that population as well. And then we see another 15-20% or so that are there for sheer economic reasons, loss of job, the economy, can't find a job, recent divorce, whatever that case may be, poor financial decisions perhaps, but that population is there as well. So as we've identified what our target audience is for our mission, we then started developing programs to help assist in each one of those target areas. So for the drug addiction issue, we have now a residential program for men and women, to take care of their drug or alcohol addiction. It's basically an 18-month residential program there at the mission, and it's free, because obviously the folks that are homeless don't have any resources at all. So we depend very heavily for our operating dollars from donations from the community. So we have that kind of taken care of. So that's a very, very comprehensive 18-month residential program for drug and alcohol, help them address that issue. And we have a very good success rate with that. We have about 65% success rate of those that 2 years after they graduate, they're still clean and sober. So it's a very, very successful program that we have there. For those that have a mental health issue, we have what's called our pass-through program. What we try to do is identify those individuals that are really truly at the point where they are looking for help and need help. And then we work with Shasta County Mental Health Office to kind of co-case manage those folks. And so they can stay in our shelter a little bit longer than our traditional stay, which is 30 days. They can spend 30 days in shelter without joining any of the programs, but then they have to go out for 30 days. So those that are enrolled in our program, they can stay longer than 30 days, as long as they're being co-case managed and they're showing progress, and we develop a case management plan for them. So we develop an exit plan, if you will, for them. So long as they're able to do that, then they can stay in the shelter a little bit longer until they can progress out. And then we also have, for those that are there for economic reasons, a job search and a savings program. Again, if they're actively looking for work, we case manage them so that, making sure that they are going out, looking for work, and we have sheets that they have to sign up and show where they are going to work or looking for work. And then if they do find work, then they can join our savings program, and where they can save up to 90% of their paycheck in a savings program so they can get that permanent housing. So everything has to have kind of a plan, and as long as they're working a plan, we'll work alongside them to help them achieve that plan. And there are some cases where we have some folks that have Social Security and or disability income, and again, we work with them to help them save their money, develop a budget so that they can reach and achieve that permanent housing. Because really, we try to work it so that they don't ever have to come back again. So that's our main goal. The other thing for the folks that are kind of having some tough time economically is our kitchen serves everybody in the community. It's not just for those that are homeless, but anybody who's in need in the community can come in. So those families that are right there on that edge, we want to keep them in their housing. We don't want them to have to make a decision to whether or not to pay their utility bill or groceries. They can come to the mission, and we serve 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, and last year we served over 182,000 meals out of our kitchen there, so that folks can stay in their place, can stay in their home. The other thing we do is refer them out to outside agencies for help. We have another ministry in town called, oh gosh, I just forgot it. I apologize. Another ministry in town that specializes in kind of a food co-op. And so they get a group of about 200 people that are right there on that edge as well, and they have a food co-op, and they go out and gather resources from the community, and the folks meet once a month, and they get several large boxes of food that can, again, help bridge that gap for their budget. So there's that as well. So there's a lot of resources. I think what you're doing right now with gathering up the different resources and the resource list is key to kind of referring folks out. One last point I wanted to make too is that even there's that whole category of homeless, right? And one of the things we found, there's basically within that large category of homeless, there's 3 subcategories of that set. There are those that are truly homeless, okay? There are those that are the transient population, they're kind of passing through, if you will. And then there's the lifestyle choices. And what we found in Reading, the lifestyle choice are the guys, usually gals, that are out there holding a sign, typically. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so they're kind of choosing to, because that's how they earn their income. So we call those the panhandlers. So we have the panhandling population, we have the transient population, and then we have the truly homeless population. So that's what we basically deal with there at the Good News Rescue Mission in Reading. If they're staying with us, and we find out that they're panhandling, we figure they don't need us, so we ask them to leave. So for us, there's some consequences for their actions and some accountability there. If they, like I said, if they have an income, we ask them to save up to 90% of their income so they can save towards that goal of achieving their permanent housing. So everything has a purpose. We talked about the length of stay for a little bit too. Let me explain that a little bit. What we found is that our goal is that we don't want to become the permanent housing solution for the homeless population. We don't want to become the flop house, if you will. So for us, it's about accountability. If they want to join one of the programs and help themselves progress, and we'll walk right alongside them to help them progress and meet their goals, then they could stay with us longer than 30 days. If they just want to utilize our services just to continue their lifestyle, then we feel like we have to use a little bit of tough love. You know, they have to kind of bear some of the consequences of some of their decisions, you know, for not wanting to progress. So we ask them to leave for 30 days, and so they can't stay in our shelter for 30 days. They can still come in and get food, they can still have access to some of our resources, but they can't stay at the shelter for 30 days. So again, it's kind of having them feel some of the consequences of their decisions, you know, holding accountability, the tough love. So that's kind of how we run our shelter there, and that's kind of the population group we have, and there's lots of different services wrapped up in each one of those programs. I don't want to take too much of your time to discuss each one of those aspects, but I just want to kind of give you a general overview. And Guy, did that kind of meet your thought process here of what
Yeah,
what your need
Could we
for?
discuss finances?
yeah, let's talk finances.
Okay.
How does that work?
We are a faith-based ministry, and we take donations or ask for donations throughout the community. So everything we have is all community donations to the mission. We take no government monies because again that would inhibit our faith-based portion of our programs. So everything's from the community. All the dollars we do go usually after grants that are not tied to government funding or have any strings attached. Yes,
I was curious, your budget, how much money do you work with now?
Okay, well, let me talk about some of the stats, so we can kind of put that in a framework, so I don't scare you too badly.
You already did, 182,000.
Yeah, 182,000 meals. We serve a population, obviously, of Shasta County and then the surrounding areas as well, so we're sort of looking at a population base around 300,000 people. So we had about 75,000 nights of safe shelter, meaning that's how many bed nights we have. On an average, in our shelter for the men's side, we see an average of around 100 to 110 men every night. On the women's side, we see an average between 60 and 65 women, and sometimes we see a high as almost 80 women with children at night coming into shelter. So in a really cold winter night, we can see well over 200 people coming to shelter.
Okay, 200 is what you can, maximum you can house about 200 people.
Well, not quite. For the men's shelter, I have 110 beds.
Okay.
Okay. And for the women's shelter, believe it or not, I only have 16 beds. Because the building that we have for the women's shelter is shared with our women's recovery program. And so that's where the majority of the beds are. So what happens with the rest of the ladies? Right? Well, we have a lot of mats. And so downstairs in our women's house of hope, what we call it, is a two-story building. And we have about 1,000 square feet that we pull out a lot of mats. And then also we have what's called our bridge building, which is our main dining hall, kitchen area, and chapel area. And that's probably around 3,000 square feet of open space there. We have about 100 plus mats there as well. So the city of Reading has, through our use permit, allowed us to be able to have about 110 mats in the chapel area and around 40 in the women's house of hope. So that's how we handle the overflows. Yes, sir.
Besides yourself, how many on your staff? How many people?
We have 28 full-time and 5 part-time people.
28 full-time.
Yeah, we run 7 days a week, and we're open, like I said, we never close. So, to get back to the point, this year's budget is $2.1 million.
What was your budget when you started?
1.64. Well, when I started 3 years ago.
Okay.
I started working on the mission as executive 3 years ago. So when we started back in '64, I don't think we had much of a budget at all.
That's where we need to hear how it grew
I think the
from.
majority of that was, by volunteers. And there's lots of different models out there for how to run. I mean, if you decide you wanted to run some sort of shelter system, there's a mission out of the Vallejo, Susan area that has a central gathering point for those that are homeless in the community, and they partner with local churches. And so what they do is they gather them up and take them to the local church it's their night, if you will. And so that local church will house them, will feed them dinner, feed them breakfast in the morning, and they'll take them back to that central collection point, if you will, in the morning.
That was how you started?
No, we did not start that. There's a mission down in Susan, Vacaville area, that's their model right now. So they don't have a shelter building per se, they just partner with the local churches to provide that shelter space. So that's one model you could take a look at, partnering with local community churches to do that. It's a wonderful way to deal with that. There is the main shelter, model that we do, which is, you get a building and then you start developing that building, and then you have the case managements and all that. the key to a lot of this stuff is having really good case management, you know, for the folks. You know, there's an initiative, a HUD initiative right now, it's called Housing First. And there's tons of money available out there, and you're familiar with that?
Very familiar.
Very familiar with that. I have just a real philosophical issue with that, and I'll just be frank about it. If you take a homeless person and put them in an apartment, you have a homeless person in an apartment. You haven't changed the behavior necessarily. You haven't affected, you know, some of their issues that they had that caused them to be homeless in the first place. You had a question about that?
On the East Coast, they're trying to say they can treat them better if they have their own identity, their own place.
And that would
They have a key to get an apartment,
Sure.
it means a lot to them.
Huh?
I'm just saying, what I get, because I go to Philadelphia and visit my daughter, but I'm getting a lot of this. They had a huge symposium in the University of Pennsylvania about, you know, people from Europe and everywhere, and Housing First was a big, big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
And it can work and that was the other part of it when I said about case management. I believe that Housing First can work if you have really good supportive services with that Housing First, meaning case management, accountability, having them take classes as part of their housing, if you will, to help them change those issues they have that cause them to be homeless in the first place. Because when it's a whole kind of counterculture, or not counterculture, it's a whole separate cultural kind of thought process when you become homeless. Because if you think about it, your whole thinking has to change in order to live in that environment, right? To be homeless, it's about survival at that point, you know. And so a lot of the behaviors is about survival. You know, watching your back, you know, seeing who's safe, and the trust level's not there. And sometimes, again, dealing with addiction or mental health issues, you know, those underlying issues may have caused them to blow out of their housing in the first place. So unless you treat those issues along with the housing, they're gonna blow out of that housing as well. So that's why I'm saying, you know, the Housing First is great if they can have the supportive services to go along with it so that they can stay in that housing and not blow out after a couple of months or causing any problems. Or that become the flop house, they start inviting all their friends. Yes, sir.
I'm assuming that if we have a building as a shelter, it's almost mandatory that we have some paid staff.
You know, you could do it by volunteers, but you'd have to have a very, very good core group of volunteers to help you staff that building.
So it
or
is
that.
possible.
It is possible. It's more difficult.
Yeah,
You
of
know,
course.
I would say you'd have to have at least one paid staff to help coordinate
Right.
the volunteer staff, so you can make sure all the schedules are met, that people are coming, you know, do some basic training on, you know, how to, you know, crisis intervention with them, and just some behavior intervention with them, those kind of things. So you want somebody who has some training and not just thrown, you know, kind of to the wolves. The other issue, of course, is part of the behavior of being homeless is about, you know, the survival skills that we find is they're very good at manipulating and pulling at your heartstrings, at really trying to get you to get them what they want, when they want it, how they want it. Okay, I'm being very frank, you know. So you have to have people who not only have a heart and a real desire to help folks, but knows how to say no. You know, one of the things we talk about all the time is that fine line between helping and enabling.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the fine line you have to find. And so you really have to be careful on your volunteers that they're not enablers. Because, you know, when we enable, we're feeding ourselves. We're feeding that need that we have to feel useful, to help people. It makes us feel good, you know, those kind of things. We derive something from that, you know. So you have to be very careful about that, walking that fine line. Can go back to the back real quick and we'll come back.